Well, hey guys, good Monday to you. We've got a lot to talk about. We've got a big storm moving into the west later this week. We've got snow in the northeast today, tomorrow, maybe even as far south as the Appalachians as we head into Tuesday. And temperatures will start to warm up as we head through the week. We're going to get into that a little bit, so let's just jump right to the maps. Here's our snow map for the next really couple of days here. The northeast, a little bit of snow into the mountains, also across the Intermountain West and the Cascades. That will be our best chances for snow. The big news, you're feeling it already, is the cool down across the east. This is huge, guys. We're talking about temperatures 10 to 20, maybe even in some cases 25 degrees below average. Numbers will be on the way down. Now, we're in for a roller coaster ride. Our temperatures are likely going to go up with the ridges that we'll likely see and down with the troughs. And I don't think this pattern's really going to change over the next couple of weeks. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. But again, look at these temperatures well below average. Anything here over blue or this purplish color, that's 20 or maybe even up to 25 degrees below average. So pretty chilly air moving south. Most of you a good 10 to 15 degrees though below average, pretty much from East Texas all across the deep south as we move toward Thursday and Friday. Temperatures will be on the way back up though here across the northern plains as some return flow starts, and then our next shot of cold air moves into the west with temperatures falling back below average, and we get closer to average, if not maybe a little above average, as we head into the weekend and early next week across the northeast. We're nowhere near that though today. Let's start off with the surface map here across the northeast. Some impressive snow totals possible, I think, in the higher elevations of Vermont, New Hampshire, the White Mountains, the Green Mountains, even into the Adirondacks. Now south of some of the cities here, or I should say some of the towns here, places like Jamestown may see some snow, but south of Rochester, I think that is an area you could see some snow south of I-90. And there could even be a little bit of snow mixing in here into parts of the Arrowhead of Minnesota, northern parts of Wisconsin. Otherwise, we start to pick the moisture up off of Lake Michigan, off of Lake Erie too here, as winds flow in out of the northwest into parts of Ohio, Pennsylvania, and also Lake Ontario. Some of those streamers could move down into parts of New York. A little bit too warm for much snow outside of the mountains, so most of the accumulating snow will be above, I would say, 3,000 feet, maybe even 3,500 feet down here into the Appalachians. The further north you go as you get into Vermont and New Hampshire, snow levels up in this region, especially northern New York, closer to 2,000 feet. Anything below 2,000 feet, I think it's going to be tough to see any types of really snow totals. But once you get above 2,000 feet, especially 3,000 feet, some decent numbers possible. Some of the models have been pretty impressive here, especially right along the U.S.-Canadian border here. And then look how far south this goes. Maybe even down into the Catskills, some snow, and then into the northwest mountains of Massachusetts. But right here along the U.S.-Canadian border, there could be some heavy accumulation, I think, into parts of Maine. That moves out pretty quickly, though, and then the cold air rushes in behind it. Now, for the big cities, we're talking about just cool, damp, a few isolated showers, but we'll actually get some clearing here with some downsloping flow. And then the snow showers linger. Look at this all the way into Wednesday for some of the higher elevations, and then we start to calm down. And we're talking about snow as far south as the southern Appalachians here. Not a lot. Again, you really have to get up here. I think you almost have to get to 3,000 feet to see really much as far as snowflakes go, and almost above 3,500 to 4,000 feet before any accumulation happens. But you're here in a lot of areas across western North Carolina. I've been talking about this for days. I just hate to see this coming because of all the folks still without power. Now you've got this cold weather. There's a quick look at the NAM model from today. Heavier snow again. And the NAM, by the way, is usually a little juiced up, so it's a little higher. The GFS is also pretty high, but if you hop over to the European from overnight, it might be a little more sensible. It's going to take into account a couple of other things too. The ground temperatures are pretty warm here, so it's going to be tough to accumulate a lot of snow, but I don't care how warm the ground is. If it comes down fast enough, hard enough, you're going to get some accumulation. So we could be looking at 2, 3, 4 inches, and some of the higher elevations, maybe even more than that over the next 24 to 36 hours. All right, across the west, we do have high pressure keeping us dry for most of the plains and then across a lot of the Intermountain West. But our next system moving into the northwest as we head into Wednesday and Thursday, that's going to bring some snow into the Cascades. It will move inland, and I think it's going to bring some snow into the mountains of Idaho, Montana, down to Wyoming, and even into Utah. And this cold air is looking pretty impressive. It may push some snow down into the Sierra, into parts of Nevada, and then eventually the Four Corner states. This could bring some decent snow into the Wasatch and maybe even southwest Colorado, as this low here, this upper low, this cold pool of air aloft sort of gets cut off from the flow. This could sit here and spin for a couple of days, and that would push some snow here into the mountains of Colorado, Utah, and eventually that starts to lift out, but it may take some time, and then another system moves into the Pacific Northwest. Again, some decent totals possible, especially the higher up you go. Some of these models putting out more than 2 feet across southwest Colorado. I don't know that we see that, but still, we're talking about some places getting more than 7, 8, 10, 12 inches of snow once you get up into some decent elevation here. Say up around Flagstaff, some of the higher peaks around Flagstaff would likely see the most snow, the San Francisco peaks, and then across the Cascades, and then into the coastal ranges here into British Columbia. Let's look at these temperatures, though, because this will likely have one of the biggest impacts on you across the east and the central United States. That cold air will continue to just advect or move south as we head into Monday and Tuesday. Tuesday is going to be pretty chilly. These will be your afternoon temperatures. We're talking about a lot of widespread 40s, close to 50, maybe even 60 close to New York, but eventually that goes away too as this cold air pushes all the way to the south. As we get into early Wednesday morning, look at that. Lows below freezing here into the Ohio Valley, well below freezing up into Wisconsin. So here comes our freezing temperatures. And we a lot of freeze warnings this morning. Those will likely be expanded as we head into tonight and then I think into Tuesday, not into the south, but just across the Midwest and then eventually into the areas of the Northeast. And then by Thursday morning, it looks to be the coldest morning, at least for the south. 7, 8 a.m. That's usually the coldest time period here. Well below freezing, I think, here into the mountains, into parts of the Northeast. New York City could even get very close to freezing. Down to Charlotte into the 30s, I think. Northern Alabama, northern Mississippi, South Carolina, upper 30s. So some frost certainly can't be ruled out when you get down to 37 degrees, right? Those surfaces, especially things like your cars, elevated surfaces that radiate that heat off at night, cool down much quicker than the air. So there's your frost or your freezing conditions. And I think it could happen in some of the areas where we get down into the 30s. Temperatures do start to rebound, though, as we head into Thursday morning. I mean, you can see we're looking at numbers now a little bit warmer back here across Mississippi and Alabama, and everybody's starting to moderate some as the weather pattern changes up. But some big cold on the way for the Intermountain West as we head into the weekend with temperatures in the teens and 20s. And we talked about that snow here across the far southwest. All right, here's a big picture look. We're going to run through the whole week here, kind of a continental look. We've talked about all this unsettled weather here across the Northeast. That's associated with this upper low that's spinning here. Surface low pressure developing here off the East Coast. That will move kind of up like this, if you will. And then around it on the northwest side, some snow and some cold weather, some showers. And then that cold continues to push south as high pressure builds in here across the Central Plains. That's going to give us some beautiful weather, by the way, as we head into Thursday and Friday across the south. So clear blue skies, I think, with this dry air. The air is really dry. You've probably noticed that. That will continue. And then here comes our next system we've talked about across the Pacific Northwest. Showers into Florida. And I'm telling you, we've got to watch the tropics as we head into the weekend, into early next week for some tropical development. Maybe another hurricane. Now, GFS is trying to pick up on something here. I don't want to pinpoint anything, but I'll tell you, it just feels favorable in this area for some development. If you look out into the Atlantic, look at this now. They've moved up the chances for development now to 40% over the next 7 days, and that's kind of where we were looking at, right? Once this thing moves here into the eastern Atlantic or possibly even the Caribbean, does it go into the Gulf? Does it move up the East Coast? Does it come into the East Coast, Florida? There's all these questions still at this point. So that's something we'll be ironing out over the next several days. All right, come back. See you guys. Have a great Monday.